Good evening. Good evening. Welcome to Let's Talk Maywood on Diversity Today Media. I am your host, Dr. Reggie Ratliff, hail from Maywood, Illinois, Garfield Giants, and Proviso East High School, Pirate Nation. And joining me is my co-host, my co-laborer in the vineyard, and expert and licensed investment advisor, Terrence Hollingsworth. Good evening, Terry. How you doing, brother?
I'm good. How are you?
Good, man. How's everything going with you in the world of finance?
It's good. It's busy, right? As everybody probably knows, that oil prices are higher because of the Iran thing,
Yeah.
and so your gas prices are higher. Believe it or not, stocks aren't very much lower. Even though if you paid attention, we were down 600,000 points on any given day. But individually, I've watched positions that I've wanted to own, and they haven't dropped so much in price. In fact, one company is up 20 points. I'm like, you know.
Right.
So, but that's the way the stock market goes, right?
For
We're
sure.
forward thinking. We think about not only how do these things affect the economy, but how does it affect individual companies?
Right. Do you think this is a long-term conflict or war or whatever what they call it? And if whether it's yes or no is your answer, how does that impact us nationally as well as maybe the village of Maywood who don't have a lot of businesses at the time?
So the way that I look at it is we never know what's going to happen in Washington. And so it could go on for a long time. It could, be done next week. We don't know.
Right.
What I try to make sure to always focus on is, are the trends short term trends? Are they long term trends? And I think that long term trend is still intact, right? Which is um, AI is disrupting every industry. Data centers are still being built.
Hmm.
Energy is still going to be affected. And
Yes.
so those are places where I'm prioritizing investments. And to be totally honest, a lot of people miss this, but Japan, who historically for probably the last 30 years has not been good.
Mm.
But they're one of the best performing sectors in the stock market, and
Mm.
we have to remember that investing is not just U.S. companies, but it's worldwide.
Right. Right. Great point. I know here in Prince County in Northern Virginia, the west side of it, um, they're building a huge data center. I mean, they said it's going to be the largest center in the country, if not the world. And the residents are suing the county because of that humming noise and it being a
Yeah,
residential area. Well, that's a whole, but it's a big deal, like you were saying.
it
Uh,
is.
yeah.
Hey, I don't want to be long, but I do want to ask you a question. Um, Jamal Bryant, Tina Turner, her name ain't Tina Turner. Turner. They had a press conference today, and they said the Target boycott is over. It was
Mm.
successful, and all those things. Tell me, what do you think?
I mean, my question is, what made it successful? Um, is it something that has a long term impact or just to get the message across? It seemed like they got the message across, but what is the message?
Yeah,
I know that sales did suffer for a period of time, but I see it as akin to the Montgomery bus boycott. Maybe not that level. When for a year and a half, they boycotted the buses in Montgomery, Alabama, and it was very effective. They got what they want in terms of integrating black riders to ride in front of the bus. So, what was the purpose of this boycott for Target? That's my question. And is it something that's sustainable that would impact change? And I don't know if it resulted in economic change, um, or if it's just a temporary solution to a long-term problem. And I see someone said, "What means it's over? Like what's over? The boycott's over, or the goal's over has been accomplished?" So, lot
Yeah,
of
some of the things that I believe are fundamentally still the problem is there's no new distribution agreements, which are very tough, right,
Mhm.
on a small business. They said that they were gonna invest $2 billion or something in the black economy. We don't know what that means, right? But more importantly, I think the model of going out and standing in front of businesses and marching is an outdated model at best. And if we want to have real impact, and I think you and I have talked about this, I may have said it before, we need to be owners of the company stock. We need to own it in size, where when they start to vote on different initiatives and CEOs and distribution agreements and all these things,
yeah,
we have a vote and actual say so. And
yeah,
until we start having that conversation, it's an organizing conversation, by the way. It's the same conversation related to getting out the vote. Until we start doing a better job at getting out the vote and organizing around what a boycott looks like, and it's not just spending money, but it's how we
yeah,
spend the money, right?
right,
It's
yeah,
spending money at owning the shares of the companies and having seats at the on their board of directors.
yeah. I think that, and I've said this before in the past, Harry. Um, Saul Alinsky, a Jew, who worked with African Americans. Matter of fact, he was a community leader in the black community. He wrote a book called Rebel for Radicals. This was someone I learned about as a graduate student at North Park University. Him and John McKnight, he says you build a community from the inside out, asset-based community development. And Alinsky, he had a group of African Americans from the community who bought stock in some of the companies that were, you know, unfairly treating customers, black customers in particular, and not having a partnership with the black community, like independent contractors. So by investing, it brought them a seat to the table. So from this boycott of Target, how many blacks are brought to the table to increase the distribution of wealth amongst the black community? I haven't seen that in the
Well,
strategic plan.
that is the key, and there's no call to action in that way. And so, are we? You know, when you ask the question, what does it mean that it's over? That's the great question,
Yeah,
right? That,
it is.
do we then go back into Target and start shopping? Which, by the way, if we tell the truth, um, you guys should come to one of our master classes and learn why black community was not Target's biggest customer in the first place.
Yeah, indeed. Well, I know. Finally, I'll leave with this note. The Target to the Kroger center that closed in Maywood, um, not just in Maywood, but in other parts of the country, because they couldn't reach an agreement with Albertson or things like that to increase business in Maywood as it relates to retail center, specifically grocery stores. It's missing the mark. And in the black community, like Maywood, when I was growing up, and our guest, Richard Holloway, can attest that these were small businesses, black owned, where the money circulated 1.5 times before it left the community. And yeah, we had a white way, but we also had diversity of other businesses throughout Maywood, because it was a strategic plan that was established by the late Mayor Joe Freeline, who was the best mayor who ever existed in Maywood, in my opinion, because he was the first black mayor, which is the hardest to accomplish. But he had a strategic plan, and we've got to get back to that.
Yeah.
So that's where I am with that position.
All right. Well, on that note, I'm not gonna continue so we can, talk with Richard. But the point is, I think, stay focused, keep investing, don't pull your money out of the market, pay attention to the asset allocation and make sure you're putting money into your retirement accounts. It matters.
Indeed. Indeed. Thank you, sir. See you
See
after
ya.
the show. Thank you. I'm excited about this next guest. He's a classmate of mine. 1986 in the mix, Pirate Nation. His name is Richard Holloway. Richard's a proud Maywood native. He's a former trial and appellate lawyer, assistant dean, overseeing criminal justice and homeland security programs across 3 universities within the American Intercontinental University system. After practicing law for a decade, Mr. Holloway transitioned to higher education and built a career-leading academic program and mentoring future professionals. He also hosts the Raw Refined, the Gentleman's Hour, a podcast exploring culture, leadership, and life through a thoughtful lens. Outside of work, Richard enjoys NBA debates, and I'm sure he probably plays basketball because he played for the Pirates back in the day. He also enjoys jazz and classic hip-hop, house music, of course, can't go without house music, and staying active through fitness and long walks. And without further ado, I'd like to bring on Mr. Richard Holloway, Esquire.
Reggie, good to see you, brother. How you doing?
Good to see you too as well, brother Holloway. How you doing, man?
Man, I'm doing great. Doing great. Thanks for having me on.
Thank you for coming on, man. I know you have a busy schedule and, you know, your position in higher academia. I just want to start off by talking about, you know, growing up in Maywood in the 70s and 80s. Talk about that for a moment. How was that for you and growing up in the neighborhood?
Man, that was just a blessing, a sacred time, really. You know, I was blessed. I was on 13th and Fillmore, so those from Maywood know I was about 2 blocks down from Jules. You know, so I was on the what's that? The south side of the of Eisenhower. So over there, I went to Roosevelt Elementary. So I was on 13th. We were blessed, man. We had all in our age group, there were probably close to 10 of us, you know, on the block. So we had a built-in basketball game, a built-in football game, whatever, just with the kids on our block, all in that same, you know, age group. So that was a blessing. It was a good time to be in Maywood. You know, literally nobody locked their doors. You know how people talk about that kind of stuff. We lived amongst all of the houses on the block. You know, we were running over here into this house, grab something to eat. Mm-hmm. We were over here in this house. So, you know, it was a great time.
Indeed. And I'm sure you have block club parties, right?
Oh yeah.
Activities.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So for those who don't know about block club parties, why don't you just talk about that, Rich?
Man, you know, we would literally shut down the block. You know, they would shut down the block so no cars could come down, and we would, you know, have music, have activities going on the block. People would be out there cooking, and you know, so it was a party on the block. It was just a cool way to go about things. I think just because, you know, everybody knew everybody, and the whole neighborhood was connected. And, you know, I was on 13th, but people from 12th would come over. People on 14th would come over. You know, everybody was right there. It was a real cool way to be. I think it was that time, the 70s and 80s was just a dope time.
It was truly a dope time, man. Mm-hmm. I just want to get your reflection on Mayor Freelon. You know, when he was elected the first Black mayor of Maywood, we were in 7th grade, maybe something like that. You know. Talk about that.
I mean, that stood out. You know, one of the things you were talking about, like the block clubs and all of that, that was one of those things that, you know, our entire block was connected. You know, you saw as you rode through Maywood, everybody on the block would have this, you know, the block clubs, you know, coordinated everything. Everyone had the same little lights in front of their home and all of that kind of stuff. But what stood out for me was the connectedness, and everybody got excited when he got elected. Just this idea that a Black man was running our town was inspirational. It was cool. And then I think our parents, you know, our parents got into it. It got everybody more involved. And so I think that kind of, filtered down to the kids. It was just that community feeling. And there was definitely pride around the fact that, this black man was running our town,
Absolutely. And I remember, if I'm not mistaken, that Mr. Freelon was a principal in his time, his field of education. And that was a very powerful moment because we aspired to be great, whether it was in education or whatever. But to have this black man as a young black man with us growing up, coming from Roosevelt like yourself, or Garfield like myself, or Lexington when it was open, or Lincoln, or Irving, Washington, whatever the case may be, it resonated throughout the entire community, especially for young black boys at the time, like yourself and myself, right?
Yeah, I had black male teachers at Roosevelt, and our principal was a black man. So, just the notion of black men in leadership wasn't foreign to me, and it wasn't really special in that way either. It was just the way it was. So, to see black men leading was just expected, I guess. It wasn't, it was just the way it was supposed to be, because for me, it was occurring at every level. In grammar school, like I said, teachers and the principal, when we got to Proviso East, so many of the teachers and the coaches and everybody were black men. So, all around us were black men that were so involved in bringing us up, raising us, and teaching us all of these important values.
Indeed. And like yourself, we have black teachers as well. The names, there are so many names, but you're right. It was a norm to have a black principal. Even like at Garfield, we had Mr. Hardy when I first got there, younger, then later Mr. Leon Thompson. But what I really loved about the principals and the teachers, Rich, was the fact that they were engaged in the community as well. They didn't just teach in the classroom or, principal office, just sit there. They actually came to our baseball games, basketball games, and football games, or whatever activity was going on, right?
Yeah. They were totally part of the community. They didn't pop in, come to work, and dip out. They were just a part of everything. So, it was woven into the culture of Maywood. Again, like I said, it was a special time to be there. I make it through there every now and then. Now I don't know really how it is, because a lot of my friends have moved away from Maywood over the years. There's a few families that are still there, but yeah, it was definitely a golden time in the 70s and 80s.
It surely was. I think the population reached as high as 30,000 residents.
Wow.
It was phenomenal. It was always something to do. We called it the bridge, right? The south side of the bridge, the expressway, Eisenhower, and on the other side of the bridge. We crossed the bridge or whatever. Even when we competed against each other, like, we're going to go to the park, whether it's your park over where you are or Tim Park or whatever, it was good competition,
we made the walk to 10th Park a lot. That was, the journey to go over there, man, because, you got to hoop at 10th Park in the summer. Yeah. And one of my good friends, Marcus Taggart, he was a few years behind us. We would just, we would walk and the goal was to see who could dribble between their legs the longest without messing up. And I think Mark probably went like about 12 blocks without messing up, but he had much better handles than me. But that was on our way there, on our way back, so it was constantly working on our game while we were going to compete. But yeah, we walked all over Maywood before we got old enough to drive.
Right. That's good stuff. I mean, I know I wasn't a ball player. I love watching you guys play at 10th Park and Waterworks Park or whatever park, 17 Park or whatever. But just the fact that we were able to play ball at 10th Park or play baseball at the Little League field, Pony League field, or swim at the Freehampton pool, ride our bike through the neighborhood, or, that kind of thing. It was, like you said, it was really a golden time. I want to ask you before we move forward, do you think that Maywood could get those golden times back? Maybe not golden times, but as good as it used to be?
I think definitely yes. I mean, just like anything else, it always comes down to the leadership, right? And so if you got the right people in place, it's always going to be more challenging nowadays because we've got technological changes, right? Everything is a lot more costly than it was, right? The cost of living now compared to the 80s. But if you got the right leadership, I think definitely that something similar to that time that we had can exist. It can't be the same because, like I said, people don't change much, but technology has changed a lot between now and then. But I think that definitely some of those important qualities could be restored. I think a lot of people are trying right now. It seems like there are a lot of people, and one of the things that I think Maywood is doing a better job right now than it did when we were there was it seems like there's a better and stronger effort to bring in more businesses nowadays, which I think is really important to achieving that goal.
It's a great point. As you know, when we played Little League Baseball and Senior League Baseball, each business was sponsored by a team. And whether it was, Maywood Proviso, First Suburban National, Local 7771, Chat's Corner, but they were represented by a business. I do see that similarity, and because thanks to technology, there appear to be more opportunities for businesses to grow, in the village of Maywood. And I do see the effort there. I just hope, from my perspective, that they could be more unified. I think that's what's lacking is that unity in the community aspect because it's so divisive. Unlike our time when we had to come together to not only to make Maywood work, but to prove the outlying communities that Maywood can be a strong Black community. You know what I'm saying? So what do you think about that?
Yeah, I think there was during that time, it was kind of this built-in need for us to kind of come together. To your point, some of the areas. I'll say when we were in high school, I worked at Kittyland. Both my brother and I did. And so that was a cool experience. But Kittyland was off of North Avenue, so that's Melrose Park. So we would ride our bikes to work, and so we were riding north through Melrose Park to get to Kittyland. It wasn't a problem going because that was during the daytime. But when we got off, we would be heading home, and basically once you cross North Avenue, we were on our bikes, so you were just getting it. You from the time you cross North Avenue till you got maybe like on the other side of St. Charles or Lake or something like that, you could kind of ease up. But up to that point, it was head down, and you were just in full sprint. Some days we went down Fifth Avenue, other days we went down 9th, because you had to mix it up because it was always some cats throwing bottles at your head or throwing rocks or bricks or something, from some of those other communities.
And back then it was an Italian neighborhood, and it was rough, man. I would never ride down Ninth Avenue by myself. I wouldn't just.
My brother was a year older than me, and he's the one that actually got me the job at Kittyland because it was it was a seasonal job, so they didn't even have to pay you minimum wage. So I was making $1.85 an hour at Kittyland, but I wasn't even 16 yet. I think I was 15 when I started there. So that was still, $1.85 an hour, working all those hours over the summer. I was still, my pockets were still relatively fat, for somebody at that age, but we weren't getting paid nothing.
No, man, Kittyland. Oh my God. What a blast from the past. I wish today's children would have that experience that we had going to Kittyland, But those two families, they couldn't get it together. My understanding was one family owned the land, the other owned the park, and they couldn't really, come together to terms, and they just let it go. And I was very sad for Kittyland.
It was a great experience for me working there, learning how to deal with people, dealing with the public and all of that. But I was a ride operator, man. I used to operate the carousel. They had that little roller coaster. I used to operate all the rides and all of that.
Nice. So, let me ask you this question. So now you're matriculating through, your teenage years. You're going through higher academia at Proviso East. How has your experiences growing through those, formative years in Maywood propelled you to get into higher standards at Proviso East as a student athlete? Because you were an athlete as well as a student, as well as a member of the National Honor Society. Is that correct?
Yeah. I was National Honor Society. I I got varsity letters in basketball and chess. So, yeah, I was on the chess team as well as on the basketball team. I got cut my freshman and sophomore year, but I kept growing and kept getting better. So I made the basketball team as a junior. So I played my junior and senior year. And I was on the chess team for all 4 years. But I'd say how it prepared me. I was in mostly honors courses at Proviso East, and that was a result of the way they did things in Maywood. It was based on your test scores and grammar school. That they kind of track students into particular tracks. So I was in the in all of the honors classes, and it prepared me well. Proviso East prepared me incredibly well. I went to the University of Illinois as an engineering student, and honestly, the first 2 calculus classes I took at the University of Illinois were review. They were everything I learned. Everything I learned at Proviso East in our calculus class as a senior propelled me through the first 2 classes at the University of Illinois, and that was a top 10 engineering school. So they were doing a great job at Proviso East at that time. I was well prepared, for. I wasn't prepared as effectively for life and being a responsible student away on my own as a freshman. Proviso East didn't teach us that part. That's the life part you got to learn and all of that. But in terms of the academics, in terms of the knowledge that I went into the University of Illinois with, Proviso East prepared me very well. Definitely.
Yeah, I wholeheartedly agree. There's so many teachers that we can name from Proviso East, so many coaches and the administrators, the principal, whose name escapes me.
I want to say it was McMillan. I think was that
Tom McMillan. Tom McMillan. Yeah. But yeah, they did prepare us from high school to college. But you wind up going into law. What was your motivation for going into law at the University of Illinois?
Well, like I said, I started out as an engineering student, but what I found was that I really only liked math. I was in metallurgical engineering. There was a lot of chemistry, a lot of physics. I didn't really like that. I liked the math. And so I toyed with switching my major to something that was going to be math focused. But what I really ultimately figured out was that I really like to argue. And so I decided I wanted to go to law school. But we actually talked about this on our podcast recently. It turns out that at some point, going back to when I was like a really small child, I had made up my mind that I was going to be a lawyer or something, because apparently I wrote my first contract when I was like 4 or 5.
Wow.
My mother pulled it out. It was a contract that I put together to get paid for doing household chores. And so I wrote up the contract and gave it to my parents. They both signed it. I signed it, So that was the very first one. And then at some point in elementary school at Roosevelt, we had to do some kind of assignment where we laid out what our future was going to look like. And we did it with like magazine clippings or whatever, And so I had put together my project, and I was a lawyer married to a supermodel, and I had like 2 sons. One of them was a professional athlete. I forget what the other one was. So somewhere long ago, it was kind of pre-programmed into me that I wanted to be a lawyer. But when I got to college, it was like I said, I started trying to decide what direction I wanted to go in. And I was like, I really do like just arguing. I like doing the debates and those kind of things. And so I was like, well, let me go to law school.
Wow. And the rest is history from that aspect.
Yeah.
So you're watching Let's Talk Maywood on Diversity Today Media. My guest is Richard Holloway, Esquire, an attorney who's now in the field of education. And we're going to talk about that in just a moment. But I want to just piggyback really quick and just kind of note that everything that you accomplished, Richard, up until a certain point where internet became possible, there was no internet growing up, as a
Mhm.
student at Roosevelt or Proviso East, and there were no emails or anything like that. Now that we are in this age of technology and going up to AI, do you believe that that has enhanced or hindered today's professionals?
I think that AI has the ability to do both, and it's really about how it's being used. I think that in the grand scheme of things, AI is has a potential negative in that it's going to allow people to be lazier in some respects. Uh, some of the foundational pieces that are important to people's just ability to learn and understand how their brain works is going to be negatively impacted by AI, just like we've seen in the past with other technologies. If people get lazier, that's a problem, right? Especially when you think about physical things. We need to be mobile, we need to be moving, and all of that kind of stuff. And our brains are the same way.
Yeah.
And so I think there's a potential for that. But I think there's also a great potential for productivity in certain ways using AI. I think the way I see it is if the world ultimately doesn't blow itself up, we get to a point where I see kind of the ultimate thing is like I'm a sci-fi person, so I'll use an example from like say Star Trek or something like that, where the computer is integrated into the whole ship, and then the science officers might be doing some work, and they're talking to the computer, and they're saying do these calculations, this and that, and they're using it as a tool along with their own expertise to go alongside with it. So there, I think you have the potential to do really great things. It's ultimately always about, as they say, the human in the loop. And
Yeah.
so whether you're using AI, whether you're using any other tool, it still ultimately comes down to the person or people that are using it. And so that's where there's that potential to go in either direction. It could be a very negative because in some respects I think it can cause people to be lazy. It can cause people to take technology for granted and stop improving themselves.
Mm.
Yeah.
I love that. I love that answer. It reminds me of when we were at Proviso East, and we learned about COBOL, Fortran, formula translation,
Mhm.
Lotus, some other programs that sits my mind. But for me, that was kind of like the pre-AI generation, whatever, technology,
Mhm.
that kind of thing, before it kind of evolved to what it is today. Um, would you have the same response as it relates to AI in your field of education? And before you answer, I just want to let the audience know in my introduction, for those of you who missed it, Mr. Holloway was a trial and appellate attorney for approximately, was it 10 years?
Mhm.
For a decade. And then he now in the field of education as a system dean overseeing criminal justice and homeland security programs across 3 universities within the American Intercontinental University system. So in that position that you have in terms of systems specifically, do you see AI as a challenge for today's students when it comes to writing papers or research papers or, thesis or anything like that? Is that something that's been, hindrance or helpful?
It's the same. It really is a very similar answer in that it's going to come down to the individual and how they're using it. It's a tool that can be used to help with research. You can have a conversation with an AI bot and engage in a back and forth that is related to some research on a topic, or you can ask it to write a paper for you.
Mm-hmm.
And so what often comes down to when we're talking about students, one of the biggest challenges that most students deal with is managing their time effectively,
Mm-hmm.
especially in 2026. We've probably got more students that are non-traditional than traditional students. And so you're talking about students who have lives, right? At least that's definitely the case for my students.
Yeah.
We don't have residential campuses, right? I've got students at 3 different institutions, but they're online and they're on ground campuses, but our campus students live and commute. So they all have lives, right? They have kids, they've got jobs, they're doing all of these things. And so where the challenges often come in is when students manage their time poorly, and that's when they tend to over rely on technology. So even before you talk about AI, you can go back to when we were in college in the 80s, right? And going into the 90s, cutting and pasting. Right?
Exactly.
was the technology
It
at
was.
the time, right? And then so you were still talking about the same things, and that's academic honesty. Is this your work, or is this someone else's work? Are you properly attributing their work to them, and you're building on their work or using their work to synthesize and do all of those things? Same way now with AI. It's just a different tool in your toolbox. You can use it the right way and it can help you, or you can cheat. And when you cheat, now, the challenge is, can we detect it? Right. That was always the challenge, though. If somebody was cutting and pasting or copying, then the faculty member had to decide whether or not there was a shift in the writing style, or if or if all of a sudden you're writing about something that yesterday when we were talking about it in class, you had no clue. So, we still had to try and figure out, who's trying to game the system. Now, the AI is often so good that you've got to use AI to detect if you're using AI.
Right, exactly.
So it's still about the tools. It's still about promoting professionalism and promoting the right values and habits in students. And then on the flip side, we're creating assignments that require students to use AI, but use it the right way. So you try and get out in front of it. You try and model the right behavior. You try and show them these are the ways you can use it the right way, and it'll help you learn and you can actually grow. Or you could just come over here and cheat and you won't get any real benefit from it, and you may or may not get caught. But if you don't get caught, again, you didn't learn anything. So you cheated yourself and you're paying for it. So, are you cool with just buying the credential, or are you actually trying to grow your brain and grow yourself as a professional?
Man, I'm so caught up in the whirlwind of secondary education, because I lead an IB business program at a high school here in Northern Virginia, and it's a struggle. I mean, it's a tug of war, because in the student mindset, they're like, "Well, what's wrong with using AI? I'm using it to write my my internal assessment, my research paper." And I have to explain to them over and over again, if you aren't citing the source, or if you aren't explaining AI, it's plagiarism. And you will not receive a diploma. You will flunk. They will kick you out of the IB program. But it just doesn't, they don't process it. And then, we have an AI tool, not just turn it in, but AI tool say what percentage of it is AI motivated. So with that theme, I wanted to ask you, Terry from the back asked about expanding on the role of community colleges in the growth cycle as it relates to AI, not just because you have adult learners, right? You work with, okay. So even you talk about those who may have graduated from high school or returned into college, to get into this area of community colleges or even universities, 4-year colleges. What do you see? Do you see the same thing from your lens taking place at that level?
Everybody's dealing with the same issues. It really is. I mean, we're seeing it now. Even I was reading an article the other day. I want to say it was in Inside Higher Ed, one of the journals, and it was talking about the spike in the number of journal submissions across the nation. Right. So academic journals, professional journals, the spike in submissions and the number of submissions being kicked back because of hallucinated citations. Right. You're talking about people who already have doctorates or who are working on doctorates or who are in the tops of their fields who are relying on AI. And we know that AI makes up stuff. Right. And so we're seeing it at all levels, not just, in high school, but all the way up to through working professionals who are making the mistake of trusting AI in situations where they shouldn't. And so then, the article, it was really interesting. There was a section where this faculty member, and so this is happening at community colleges, junior colleges, 4-year universities at all levels. But this one, the faculty member wrote to these two art authors saying, "Hey, I want to share your article in my class. Can you send me a copy?" And he included a citation, a title, and the journal name and the two authors. Turns out the two authors had written for this particular journal before, but the AI had completely made up this particular article.
Wow.
So, they wrote back to the faculty member, to that professor, saying, we never wrote an article of this name before.
Wow.
The AI completely, so it had a legitimate journal. It had two legitimate authors who had written together in this particular journal before, but totally made up the article. So yeah, it's impacting at every level. And so the challenge going forward, it's the same challenge we're seeing everywhere. It becomes a trust issue. You can't trust what's real. But the thing we've always talked about with students, why do I have to cite? What's APA about?
Right.
Well, the whole point of it is so that we can trust what you're saying, right?
Absolutely.
We can trust what you're saying because you are citing sources that are credible. So you're referring us to people who know what they're talking about.
Right.
We're not just relying on what you're saying, because how do we know what you're saying? You're still a student, right?
Right.
You're growing, and you'll eventually become this professional who has all of this knowledge and skill. But for right now, I can't just trust your word.
Right.
So you got to support your word with some other people's words that are credible.
Right.
Now we're losing the trust of what's credible because, but that's why now you're seeing more and more of the AIs that, and you can tell them when you ask that query and you say, give me these results, give me your sources too. And so now I can click on each one of these links and I can see, is this an actual article? Or is this one of those 404 pages that come up saying, not found?
Right. Right. Yeah. I get that a lot. Yeah, it's a struggle, like you said. I just want you to expand on what you're doing right now. Let's see. Randy said it was returning. Oh wow! If you were okay, if you were the Attorney General when Trump leaves office, would you pursue charges against him, and which ones would you charge? Or who else in this administration? This is Randy McFarland, everybody. I called him Mr. Maywood growing up. This man loves the community. Grew up in community, also Horizon East graduate, 86 in the mix. I think he was a teammate of yours on the basketball team.
The master of the bank.
Yeah.
The master of the bank shot right there.
Yeah. Nice.
Randy McFarland, like you said, the unofficial mayor of Maywood. Now, if I was the Attorney General when Trump leaves office, yes, I would be pursuing charges against him. I'd be pursuing charges against so many people because I think it's necessary to restore the trust of the American people in our government. Right? You've got so much shadiness going on, financial, self-dealing like never seen before in American history. Just the money that's being made from day one, his refusal to divest from his companies during his first term, the meme coin, so many different things. But most importantly is just the child predator stuff that's rampant. And as you can see every day, right, it's more and more coming out. Not just within our government, but across the nation. Across the planet. And you see that other nations are holding their people accountable, but not in America. Not too often. There was a judge that just went to jail. I want to say, I forget if it was North Dakota or South Dakota, but he just got 20 years, and he had been on the bench for decades. And it turns out he had been a child predator for decades. There's so many instances of pedophilia being accepted through so many different levels of our government. It's just, but definitely, I'd be charging all kinds of people left and right, all up and through the federal government right now. But I don't think he'll survive this second term.
Why not? Why do you think he'll survive?
Because he lives on McDonald's. And the amount of McDonald's he eats is unsafe for a 25-year-old, right? Let alone a cat of his age and health.
5 years old, that man,
right? But I think the real concern is going to be who comes along next.
Yeah.
and what happens next, because ultimately he's in this position because he was willing to do whatever it took to avoid jail.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
he's clearly sold his soul
To become president.
to who knows who for sure, right?
Right. Right.
But yeah, I would be to answer Randy's question, I would be coming at him with everything I could think of. I would be getting real creative,
Yeah.
just like they've done. They've pulled out old laws from 200 years ago that are still on the books, but no one's touched. I'd be doing the same. I'd be trying to find every old law that's still on the books that we might use to throw a couple more years at him, and that might allow us to take back all of that money that he and his family have gotten during this time. The
Absolutely.
billions and billions, Jared Kushner, all of them.
Oh yeah. Oh, great point. And since now the audience wants you to put your attorney hat on. So I think it's one of your students. Since Randy opened this Pandora's box.
That's not one of my students. That's one of our classmates.
Oh, nice. Oh, sure is. Nice.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think about Canada's parade regarding trade and government backing the Canadian dollar? Great question.
Yeah, gonna put me on the spot like that and make me have to think deeply. I think that in general, Canada's doing a great job of pushing back. I think the new alliances and allegiances that have been shaping up all around the U.S. are important and significant, not just for this kind of short term meaning through 2028. But looking far beyond, because I think ultimately America needs to be knocked down a few pegs, so that some reality can come back, and because we need to rejoin the rest of the world as soon as we can on so many of these things. And I think I appreciate everything that Canada's been doing to push back, to stand up for themselves.
Mm-hmm.
We're not gonna sit here and be punked by this crazy man. So I'm down with everything that Canada's been doing.
Nice. I think that it bears notice that the governor of California, Gavin Newsom, he has been pretty vocal about Donald Trump and his indiscretions, if you will.
For the most part, he has. I think I think Gavin Newsom has lost a little of his luster. And that he didn't go in some areas. I don't feel like he's gone as far as he could, because he's trying to preserve his own ability to run. In 2028. And so I think a few of the corporate kind of things he's pulled back on, and it hasn't been as aggressive as he could have been. I think that's one of the problems with the Democratic Party in general, is there's a little too much allegiance to corporate America in some respects, But in our current system, it's kind of set up to force people to go where the money is.
Indeed. And so speaking of money, you talked about Trump, and I don't know if extortion is the right word, going to other countries and taking oil like in Venezuela, and what he's doing in Iran. Was it trying to take over Greenland, trying to buy Greenland to access those resources? And then with the redistricting throughout the United States, particularly the red states, with the midterm elections coming up, what message do you think that sends to the United States as it relates to the commander in chief, making these moves?
I think it speaks to the brokenness of our system. Is what it ultimately speaks to, is the brokenness of our system, that this is being allowed to happen, right? We've got a Congress that has basically just rubber stamped everything he's done. Morals have gone out the window completely, and it's all because of money. And so, money, and to your point, extortion, there's this, I would say there's this fear, right? Internally within our nation, there's a fear of retaliation. Nobody's willing to do anything. And then, he's just being a bully, and he's being a bully all over the planet. I think that it's not going to continue to be as effective unless he continues to ramp it up, the violence. And so that's the concern, is it's going to have to get more violent for him to continue to be effective in the ways that he wants to.
Yeah.
Because even within America, we're pushing back so much.
Yeah. Do you believe that it's just about money, or do you think that this also has something to do with the Epstein files, trying to, keep that in the back burner, since 3 million files are still unreleased, and he's trying to just keep that, pushed back?
I think that it's definitely about more than just money as it relates to him and the Epstein files. I mean, it's pretty clear, right? We don't have the access to all the evidence. But there's so much overwhelming information out there that speaks to just the basic reality that America ultimately is okay with pedophiles. Is what it, you see it on so many levels across so much that's not being done. And like I said, you look at what's going on in other countries. Leaders are being held accountable in ways that we've never imagined, right? Got a British royal losing his royalty.
Oh yeah.
And being arrested, but here in America, everything is okay. But that's, like I said, it speaks to just the reality of how prevalent it really is in so many communities and so many corners of our nation. People aren't really talking about it, but they know it's going on, and it has been going on for so long. It's become almost acceptable. Is the real underlying problem. That's why there's not enough of a push. When you're talking about 3 million pieces of, when the Department of Justice released 3 million files, 3 million documents, documents, that's not something that happens overnight, right? That's investigations that have been going on for years and years and years. They just kicked back in Congress. There was a Republican actually put forth something to try and there's one of the internal investigation committees. They wanted them to release all of the stuff that they had from all of their investigations of Congress, of all of the sexual claims, sexual harassment, etc., all of their investigations of members of Congress.
Wow.
And bipartisan, they shot it down. They didn't want that to come out in the public. So I mean, the fact that there are so many members of Congress that currently have lawsuits pending, for sexual harassment or this or that, that's just the reality is that everybody's out of control in this country.
Yeah, it's kind of like they normalized this pedophilia behavior and criminal activities that's taking place, within the government. I'm totally with that. Like I asked you the question about will Maywood recover from what's happened over the past 15, 20 years as far as economically and politically and things like that. Do you think our country will unite to a level where we'll be able to, hold Donald Trump accountable, and Hegseth and Pam Bondi and Marcus Rubio and others who are uneven unnamed, and return the United States to some type of cohesiveness?
I'd be really surprised if that happens. I would be. I don't see the kind of courage and leadership to do the things that are necessary because of the way our system is currently set up. There's too much money in the system. Ever since Citizens United said that, basically a corporation is a person and has free speech rights and all of that kind of stuff for purposes of campaign contributions, that totally changed the game and just let all of the dark money in. That's going to be hard to fight over the years, because as long as super wealthy people can do like Elon Musk did, you've got problems. And not just because, they were throwing so much money not just to get Trump elected, but now they're starting to really impact lower elections, right? At the state level and at the county level, and wherever there's an opportunity to impact a business opportunity, we're seeing influencing of the elections. And
Yeah.
so people are that's why it's so important for everybody to vote, not just because of the presidential elections,
Right.
but those policies and those attitudes are being reflected at every level, right? I remember the case some years back where the clerk, I want to say it was Tennessee or somewhere like that, refused to marry a gay couple.
Oh,
And then,
yeah.
and that ended up going all the way up to the Supreme Court. And so that's about local elections, right?
Yeah.
Who you've got in local offices and the impact that they can have on everyday lives.
Yeah.
And so whether they're conservative or whether they're liberal or whatever, and their outlook on life and whether or not they think they should be pushing their morals on other people is influencing why people get into office now. So,
Yeah.
Great
point. Great point. It reminded me of Jasmine Crockett when she ran for Senate in Texas. And she's like, this is just, there's something wrong here.
She's 1,000 times more qualified than the white guy that beat her.
Right.
I mean, he wasn't necessarily a bad person or anything. And he was a teacher. But she has, just comparing the levels of experience, the qualifications, she's 1,000 times more qualified than him. But, America really, really struggles with putting Black women in places of authority, right?
Indeed.
There's the intimidation factor of the intelligent Black woman just is very scary to a lot of people for some reason.
Remind me of the sister who ran for mayor of Atlanta. Was it governor of Atlanta, and she lost to the guy who's the Secretary of State. Just recent elections. Powerful sister. And those in the audience, if you could remember her name, just throw it out there. But yeah, she was a threat, and she did not win. But because of lack of qualifications, but they didn't want a Black woman to be the governor of, Georgia.
Georgia, yeah.
Yeah. Well, why would we let that happen? Like, why would they do that? Let that happen, So just so you know, out there, audience, you're watching Let's Talk Maywood and Diversity Today Media. Just a few more minutes with Mr. Rich Holloway, who was originally from Maywood, Roosevelt Elementary School graduate, Providence East High School graduate, University of Illinois, and University of Illinois Law School graduate. Is that correct?
Yes.
And now he's in higher education, working as a system dean, overseeing criminal justice and homeland security programs across 3 universities within the American Intercontinental University system. But he is still an attorney. So anything you want to talk about?
I'm not still an attorney. Haven't been an attorney for a while.
You gave up your license?
When I got into education, actually, it was just it was easier to not have to answer a million questions from students and their families about, and so if I'm not holding my license, then I literally can't answer your legal questions because that's the unauthorized practice of law.
Right.
So, so now if somebody asks me a question, I was like, well, I'm not practicing law, so I can't give you any legal advice.
Nice.
But as an educator, we can talk about a lot of different legal things because the law is the law. But I can't give anybody any advice.
I'm glad you differentiated that. I'm glad you said that, because people see, you used to be an attorney or see law school graduate. I'm sure. Do you still get those type of, inquiries from people who want to ask you?
Oh, yeah.
Legal advice?
Yeah, I mean, most of my friends know I haven't practiced in a long time, and so they're interested in my opinion about things, but they know that I'm not doing the day-to-day research in particular areas, so I couldn't tell you anything that's brand new anyway. But if a friend reaches out to me and they've got an issue, I want to be like, oh, well, yeah, you need to call you a lawyer.
Right.
You need, and I know a good one for this.
Right.
Or I don't know anybody for that, but I'll see if I can find you somebody. Right. To help you with that. Or, sometimes it's like, well, yeah, you definitely need to talk to a lawyer about that, or, so that kind of thing.
Yeah. I want to ask you, as we start to close this podcast, about your podcast.
Yes.
I would like for you to talk about that, the Raw and Refined, the Gentleman's Hour. Who are your fellow hosts on that, and what kind of topics do you discuss?
Well, my co-hosts are Greg Kelly and John Card, two more of our class of '86 in the mix graduates. So well, we've been best friends since Proviso East, and really during the pandemic, we started texting each other all the time. Just as a lot of us found during the pandemic, the need for a little more connection because we were kind of all in our own spaces and away from each other. So we started texting more often, started talking more often than we had been. And so that evolved over the years into some great conversations. And so at some point we were like, maybe somebody else might be interested in what we're talking about amongst ourselves. Mm-hmm. And so that was how it was kind of born. So we're what, like a little over a year in now. We've got over 20 some episodes, I want to say, or altogether, or right around there. But we talk about a lot of different things. We focus on things that we think are of interest to Black men in our age group. So Black men in their 50s. But we've talked about a number of different things. I'm actually editing one of our old episodes because we started out just doing the audio podcast. But if you checked us out recently, Reggie, we've been putting up the videos on YouTube. When shortly after we started recording the podcast, we started recording both audio and video, but we're just pushing out the audio podcast for a while. So let's see, one of our early topics was John Henryism. John Henry was this mythical Black historical figure that basically worked himself to death. And so so the notion of that episode was us talking about Black men and their need to, not kill themselves, trying to support their families and all of that. One of, I think, my favorite episodes was called Beyond the Draft. We had John and Greg's sons on there with us, and we were having a conversation that was born out of the draft last year of Sanders. Oh gosh, I'm blanking on his first name right now, but in Cleveland, the quarterback. Shedeur Sanders.
Yeah, Shedeur Sanders.
So we were talking about the kind of the double standard that was being applied to Shedeur Sanders compared to white quarterbacks at the time. How they were talking about he was basically they didn't like his attitude because he wasn't kissing their butts like they wanted him to. He was too arrogant or something like that. So that one was a generational conversation because we had John and Greg's sons on there, my nephews. And so we were looking at that issue from our perspective as well as their perspective. They're both in their late 20s. And so that one I thought it was a really interesting conversation because it delved into not just sports, but used sports as kind of a metaphor for life and kind of talked about that double standard and things like that. We've talked about high blood pressure, the need to, to have downtime, we've had lighter conversations, and actually we're getting ready to do one on 80s nostalgia. So we're going to go back. We're going to go back in time and relive and revisit the 80s and all of the stuff that
when music was real, when they had bands and that kind of stuff. Yes, sir.
Yeah, all of that. So we're working on that one right now. But yeah, Raw and Refined, the Gentleman's Hour is the podcast. Enjoying it again. Like I said, it's the three of us have been real tight for a long time, and we just thought, the conversations that we've had for a number of years, I consider them two of the smartest cats that I know. Yeah. And so, as Charles Baker always says, iron sharpens iron. And
yes, sir.
So we engage in these conversations because we feel like we feel comfortable calling each other out. We feel after almost 40 over 40 years of friendship, since 1982. So so 40 some years of friendship, we can pretty much say anything to each other and it's going to be all right. Right. At the end of the day. So we try not to call each other stupid on camera, but Um,
It slips out.
but yeah, so it's a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun. So check us out if you haven't been. But
Absolutely, I sure will.
we're on all of the podcast platforms, and we're on YouTube, and I'm working on our Patreon site right now. So.
I would definitely check you guys out. Thank you for telling me and sharing this information with the audience. So we are, Terry said we're over an hour. I have to ask you this question. I got to ask you this question. As it relates to Maywood, I'm not sure if you were aware of the situation where the parks between that were owned by the village and those are owned by the park were supposed to merge in 2007, but they never did. That's the background. And it was, so Mayor Booker said time expired or whatever. Couldn't find out that wasn't true. There's no elapsed time. There's no deadline. If you know about that, that situation, do you think that's a good idea for the parks to merge under the park district and the village not own the parks? Because we're talking about Fairhampton, Veterans Park, all the main parks, 10th Park and all that. Do you think it should be owned by the village, or any parks that owned by the village, or should they all be owned by the park district?
That's an interesting question, because I think initially the notion of ownership and control is an important idea, right? Who's got the say at the end of the day? Who's going to maintain things the way that we think they should be maintained? Is that the village, which or the park district, who's going to have a different set of or a different agenda maybe than the village? But I think at the end of the day, another important consideration is resources. So who's gonna have the resources and effectively manage the resources to get the most out of the parks? In an ideal setting, I would say I would prefer that to be Maywood, that's in control and making the decisions. But then again, like you mentioned earlier, do we have the right leadership at Maywood right now? And the resources? I haven't been keeping track of things like how Maywood is doing financially, so I don't know if from a financial perspective, is it better to sit with the park district or with Maywood? So I think those two things come down to it. Is it the money, and is it the vision for the use of those parks? Who's going to utilize them best for the people of Maywood?
That's fair. That's fair. Just for the record, the village is $8 million in debt.
Okay.
The park district is about $250,000 in debt. So they're both in debt. And they say they're working to try to, turn into the black, and, they get money from a casino. The village does from a casino and other grants and things like that. So they're trying to increase their revenue stream to become, profitable, solvent, I guess, if you will. And I just want to get your perspective on that. And I just want to end by just putting out there publicly, and I know you didn't expect this, but audience, this brother here, I mean, we go back to Proviso Luis and beyond. He gave me my first opportunity as I was leaving corporate America to teach at what was then Westwood College. I reached out to him because we were a dean at the time.
I think I had a different title, like program chair or program director or something. Yeah.
So Rich has always been an upstanding brother. If I was just somebody who didn't have the credentials, he would have guided me to the steps that would lead to me getting the credentials to be a professor. But I happen to have the credentials and I had the background. So, he put me in a position where I would, go forward, submit my resume, go through the interview process like anybody else would, but to ultimately become a professor at Westwood College. And I wound up teaching at O'Hare and downtown long before they closed. And then I wound up teaching at several universities, including my position as an adjunct professor. But it really helped me streamline into the field of education, not just because of support from Rich, providing me with the guidance, if you will, and mentoring me through the process. But my mom was an educator, so it was always in me. So it was a seamless process to get into education. And I love education because it gave me an opportunity to work in a higher education as an adjunct professor, but also work with today's youth here in Northern Virginia as an IB business management instructor to help them prepare for college. And so I just want to thank you publicly, Rich, for, providing me with the opportunity to mentor me through the process, getting in my case if there's something that I need to improve in a certain area, because he would evaluate. He evaluated me. So he gave me the scores that was in my best interest for my future. And if it wasn't for that, where I was raw, I improved on it. And now I receive, high credentials, awards, and things like that, not just in academia, but in the community. So I want to thank you, my brother, for the opportunity. Much love to you. And I wish you continued success in your journey in education, as well as your podcast. And I hope it continues to grow. And one day I see you guys on ESPN or CNN or C-SPAN or whatever it is you're doing, because you guys are great. I know all three of you brothers. Class of 86 in the mix representing.
Definitely.
Yes, sir. And I just want to give you a couple minutes for any closing thoughts that you would like to share with the audience. And please do not hang up after you give your closing thoughts. Brother Holloway.
Thank you. For starters, it was my pleasure to be in a position to hire you. It was, I was just beaming with pride. The opportunity to hire one of my classmates, and I've been blessed since then to hire some other people that we know. So that's I think was one of the biggest blessings, to be able to reach back and grab somebody from my neighborhood that I knew was qualified and just needed the opportunity to get a foot in the door. So I'm so proud that I had the opportunity to play a part in your success like that. Aside from that, just enjoyed the chance to get on here. I've been checking your show out for a while. So, getting to be a part of it is extra special, because it's Let's Talk About Maywood, and that's where we all came from, where we all grew up and turned into the people that we are, that are having an impact all over the place. So continued success to you and the show. Continued success to Maywood, moving in a positive direction. And thanks for having me on, brother. I appreciate it.
Thank you, my brother. I appreciate you as well. We didn't get an opportunity to talk much about Jesse Jackson Sr., Reverend Jesse Jackson Sr., who passed away recently, but he was a civil rights icon. Reverend Jackson was. He was able to break the barriers of racism during the civil rights era, marched right along with, Ralph Abernathy and, Andrew Jackson and, of course, Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., as well as others from diverse backgrounds, racial backgrounds and spiritual backgrounds. It wasn't just preachers. It was Muslims. It was Jews. It was those who, who were in, Catholic, Catholicism. And so it was a whole diversified audience. And Jesse Jackson was right in the midst of that movement. He ran for president twice. He didn't win, but boy, did he wake up the nation. And so we like to pay homage to the Jackson family, praying for those, the family members of the Reverend Jesse Jackson. May he rest in eternal peace. But I also would like to close by saying that Brother Holloway put it best. Charles Baker, who also is a Class 86 graduate, who we need to get in this podcast. And Randy McFarland, brother, we need to get you on this podcast as well to talk about the great work you're doing. But Brother Baker says it, iron sharp as iron. He paid it forward. He gave brothers like me the opportunity, and many others, I'm sure, just like I took that mantle and I'm passing on to others. We should all pay it forward, because a blessing is when we are given, not just when we're receiving. So when we expected nothing in return, we'll be blessed tenfold if we just continue to give. And so I encourage you to give and be a blessing to others. Even if it's something that you think is small, it may be huge to others. And let us not forget that we are in the midst of early voting from March 2nd through March 16th. Early voting is taking place. So please vote like your life depends on it. Because guess what? Our life depends on it. You see what's going on across the country. So please vote like your life depends on it, and pray for our leadership, not just, at the 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue, but locally as well. I'm praying for my hometown of Maywood and hope things will continue to improve. And with that said, that ends our podcast. I am your host, Dr. Reggie Ratliff. Tune in for our next podcast where we have another guest that talks about the ventures of Maywood, the past, present, and future. like us on Facebook, and subscribe on YouTube. Until next time, God bless you. Be safe, vote, and good night. Peace.